In today's business world, being an average CEO is no longer an option. That's why we're committed to equipping you with the resources and the tactics necessary to not just survive, but to thrive. You're listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline podcast, where we are more than just a voice in the crowd.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline. Today, we are talking about all things better marketing, podcasting, sales. We are so lucky to have Tom Schwab with us. Tom, welcome. Can you please tell our guests a little bit about yourself, about Interview Valet?
Yeah. And so my biggest belief is that we're all not one funnel away, but we're one conversation away. Right. I believe that for all of our companies, right, it's obscurity is our biggest problem. We could help thousands, tens of thousands of people. They don't have to be in our local area. The problem they're not buying from us is because they don't know we exist. And so what Interview Valet does is it helps thought leaders, business leaders, inspiring CEOs get out there on targeted podcast interviews so they can talk to their ideal clients and get that know, like, and trust. In this AI world where people are thinking, oh, is this Chat GPT? Well, when you're actually talking to them, when they see you, when they hear you, that authenticity really, really works today in marketing.
So you have, go ahead, Danielle.
I was going to say, Tom, one of the things that I saw in your work with Interview Valet that you've said, time and again, is that better marketing makes for easier sales. And I think that a lot of our audience would love to have easier sales. I think we all want that. And so we'd love for you just to elaborate on that a little bit, talk about what that means and how they can make that happen.
Yeah. If you think about most marketing today, it's all focused on more, right? Send more emails, post more, right? And we're getting more efficient at things that are less effective, right? And so from that standpoint, marketing is not supposed to bring you all of these leads, right? Everybody says, do you want more leads? No, we should be optimizing for profits, because profits means we're bringing value to the market. And so starting from that, we want to, in our marketing, make it magnetic. And too often people think, oh, magnetic, that means it attracts everyone. No, that's not how a magnet works. It attracts the right people and it repels the other. So after they listen to you for 30 or 45 minutes on a podcast, they're either turning you up or turning you off. And either one of those is great, because at the end of the day, you want raving fans. So being able to do better marketing where clients can self-identify if they like you, if they agree with what you're doing, your point of view on the world, that makes the sales process so much easier. Because the data shows that when people hear you on a podcast interview, it closes faster for a higher initial engagement, and there's less churn because it's based off of a relationship. And really, that's what we're trying to do, not just get more leads.
So, Tom, do you think that, or is your advice for business owners to be on more podcasts, start a podcast? Is there a difference? Which do you recommend to our audience?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I don't think it's an either or, right? It's like, should you be an Uber driver or an Uber passenger? Well, it depends what your goals are. It's the same platform. So being a host is a great way to nurture your current leads, nurture your current clients. But being a host is a commitment, right? Anybody that says it's easy has either never done it or never done it well, right? There's a reason most podcasts die within the first 10 episodes. So the idea of being a guest is the way to go out there and to tap into other people's audiences, right? To get new leads, to get new backlinks. And we've seen a lot of people where they'll be a guest for a while to make sure that they like the medium, so that they're comfortable with it. They can see behind the curtains how other people do it. And then they can say, this is what I want my podcast to look like. I think the biggest thing, whether you're a host or a guest, is just getting known by your ideal customers.
We really can resonate with that. We're about 80 episodes in, I think, with our current podcast that everyone's listening to. And it is not a walk in the park by any means. It does take commitment, but you get to meet a lot of fabulous people. So
I feel guilty sometimes saying that because, okay, look at this from the outside. You've got Danielle and Nicole are doing all of the work, right? I show up, answer the questions, and then after this, they and their team are going to edit this. They're going to post it up there. They're going to promote it. Now, as a good guest, I'll be promoting it too. But if you think about it, it's almost like going to a party or going to a wedding, right? What's more fun, to go to somebody else's where they're doing all of the work, setting it up and being the guest? Or do you want to plan that event all the time?
Yes. Yeah. Good point. Very good point. I'm going to think about that. Something, Tom, I know that you've also said in your work is big fish don't swim through funnels and whales don't click. And that's something that stuck with me, stuck with us. It's something that neither one of us have heard before. So I think our audience probably hasn't either. So what does that mean?
It means that this idea that you're one funnel away is good marketing, but it's not true, right? So there's this idea out there that if we just, have this perfect video landing page, video sales page, if we have the perfect funnel, if we just buy some Facebook ads, all our dreams will be taken care of. And then people will say, well, we can do this and we'll scale it up to big ticket sales. And that's interesting because if you look at how the leaders in any industry are doing it, that's not how they're doing it. So if you look at professional services, right? B2B professional services, if all of these funnels and clicks and ads worked, you'd see people like McKinsey, Bain Capital, Ernst & Young, they'd be building their entire business off of that. Even on coaches and consultants, people will say, well, this is the way Brendan Bouchard does it, or this is the way Tony Robbins does it. And I'm like, they forget that for the last 20 years, they were talking to people. They were building that relationship. They have the authority now in order to put an offer up there. And I think too often now, I'm an introvert naturally. And so I think it's easy for me to sit in my office, pretend like I'm working, right? And to build the perfect email, build this perfect sequence. And I know if I get it perfect, then my business will take off. But what I've noticed is that my best clients, my best team members, my best partners, they didn't come through a funnel, right? They came through a conversation. And this idea that your ideal customer is just waiting to click and be nurtured and go through a funnel. I would say, if anything, your best customers don't want to do that. So find another way to interact with them.
Yeah. And really, really good advice.
Yeah, it's really great advice. Do you advise our listeners to do any digital marketing or some, and then just to find where their audience is? What's your advice on digital marketing then?
Yeah. And it's almost, well, I would say everything is digital marketing now, right? So what you're doing with hosting a podcast, that's digital marketing, because it's not only your clients are hearing it, but the search engines are listening to it. AI, all those large language models, they're learning from this. So it's setting you up as the authority. So think about where you can create the easiest. So for me, it's very easy to talk and answer questions. Then you can repurpose that in different ways. So what we talk about here, we can take the videos, the reels, and put those up on social media. We can get the transcript. We can find different quotes from here. So it's interesting, like podcasts. I think, here we are talking 2024. I think 2030, somebody's listening to this and laughing every time we say podcast, because it's so morphing, right? If somebody hears us on YouTube, is it still a podcast? If it's somebody hears a short, is that still a podcast? If this gets picked up by terrestrial radio or like Sirius XM, is that still a podcast? At the end of the day, I don't care if it's a podcast or digital marketing or what. I just want to make sure that people hear what we have to say.
That's great advice.
Very true.
So, Tom, I'm interested to know how you came to be the founder, correct, of Interview Valet. What was the startup behind it?
All right. So every CEO's got this perfect story, right? Where they had this vision, they did the business plan, and it turned out this way. It's a great story, but mine didn't happen that way. So my last company was HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. We built it up from being a regional player to a national leader and sold it off. And then about 2014, I was in a mastermind group down in Nashville, Tennessee. And some of the people said, well, how did you grow your last business? And I said, well, it was guest blogging, right? Tapping into other people's audiences. But by 2014, it was obvious that blogs weren't working anymore. So I hypothesized that you could use podcast interviews, right? Tapping into other people's audiences, just like we used to use guest blogging. So I started to test it, started to help other people in my mastermind with it, and it really worked, right? We did a study with HubSpot that showed that the traffic from a podcast interview converted 25 times better than a blog. So it was working well. And I'd already had one company and I wasn't looking to start another one. So people said, well, you should write a book. So I did a cheesy little PDF, gave it away. People said, you should do a course. I did a course and I never launched it. I never launched it out of beta because I had the course, people would take it, and you could see from the back end that they weren't doing anything with it. And I don't want to take people's money if they're not getting results. And so I asked the people that were taking it and said, be honest with me. What's the feedback? And almost to a person, they said, I want to be the guest. You take care of the rest, right? I just want to be the performer. And so we beta tested that. Actually, it was one of our initial beta testers that came up with the name Interview Valet, bought the domain for us, gave it to us. And after beta testing it for about 4 or 5 months, it was working so well that we launched Interview Valet. Now, in hindsight, it's like, oh, that was great. Well, no, for the first 3 years, I didn't know if I was a trailblazer or an idiot, because I would go and give my elevator pitch. And I'd give this perfect elevator pitch and they'd look at me and they'd say, what's a podcast? All right. A little bit early, but it gave us the chance to figure it out, to come up with all the systems, the processes, make relationships in the space, so that in about 2019, that when podcasting took off, the business took off. And now we're, a team of 22 people in Europe and North America. We're all remote. Not everybody wants to work with me in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
We are all remote too, so we completely understand. And I can relate to the introvert stuff too. So we're aligned in those ways. Can you tell our audience what the best piece of advice you received as a CEO?
I'm going to flip that around, because I've gotten lots of good advice, but I've also gotten bad advice.
Oh, that's a good one.
The worst advice I ever got was from my grandfather. And he was a wonderful businessman. He ran Cunningham Service Station. And when I was 17 years old, going off to the Navy, sat down and had a beer with him. And he thought it was my first beer. I won't correct him on that. But he said, choose carefully who you drink with, because you can't choose who you work with. And I understood what he was talking about, right? That if you were within 10 miles of his service station, you were his customer. I think today that is awful advice, because we've got so many clients there. You should be able to choose who you want around your business, right? If you wouldn't trust someone with your family, why would you trust them with your business? I only want to work with people that I love to work with, that I'm proud to represent them, right? We've all got a a glut of potential clients. So I think we need to be very picky and very particular, because our best clients, those are going to be the people that value what we do. They're going to give us energy, and they're also going to give us profits.
I loved that story. Thank you for changing the context of
I
it. It
love
was
that.
wonderful advice. Danielle, do you have any last minute questions for Tom before I, of course, ask him the question we ask all of our guests?
Well, just along with what you said, the best advice or worst advice, do you have any sort of quick action step that you think any of our listeners could take if they want to dive into this world of podcasting? Like you said, sort of getting your feet wet as a guest. What's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I think most people they're their biggest problem, right? And we all underestimate what we know, and we overestimate what other people know, right? And so many people are like, well, what would I have a podcast about? What would I talk about on a podcast? And just remember, what's ordinary to you is amazing to other people, right? If you passed fourth grade math, you are a god to somebody that's trying to figure out second grade math. So we're all going along on this journey. So I would encourage you, if you're listening, you're blessed to be a blessing, right? You've learned something along the way. Somebody taught you something. Share that with other people. And you can do that as a guest, as a host. And people will say, well, I don't like this. I don't like the sound of my voice. Then don't listen to your podcast, right? Or the idea of, I'm not ready for Joe Rogan. That's okay. Joe Rogan probably wouldn't want you right now, right? So find the podcasts where you could add value. And, like I said before with introverts, sometimes we have a hard time asking. So I always tell people, serve, ask, right? If you want to be on a podcast, listen to the podcast, leave them a rating and review, share their information, make some comments on it, then reach out to them and say, Nicole, Danielle, I would love to share this information with your audience. I think it would help them. They'll be asking you to be on the podcast. So my advice would be change that mindset of you have something to offer, and then be brave enough to step out there and offer that to the world.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. Definitely me too. Tom, so what, as we ask all of our guests, what does not your average CEO mean to you?
For me, I think that's an overused term, right? Chief Executive Officer. I've got friends that were CEOs of publicly traded companies. So for me, I'm not doing the same job as they are, right? I'm not dealing with investors. For me, CEO means Chief Evangelist Officer. My job, my passion, what I love to do is evangelizing for our category of podcast interview marketing, evangelizing for my company and my team, and then evangelizing for our clients. And to me, that's what CEO means to me, is Chief Evangelist Officer.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tom. Can you tell our audience where they can hear more from you?
Sure. I was going to say the best practice is always to send people to one place. So we'll make it easy. Just go to interviewvalet.com/notyouraveraage. And everything we talked about will be there. There's an assessment. Will podcast interview marketing work for me? 10 questions. I wrote a book called Podcast Guest Profits: How to Grow Your Business with the Targeted Interview Strategy. You can get it on Amazon, or if you want, just go there and I'll give you a free copy. And then finally, if you'd like to talk with me or my team about how you could speak directly to your ideal customers to grow your brand and grow your business, just go back there to interviewvalet.com/notyouraveraage.
Thank you. Yes, these will be in the show notes, so you can easily click on it. And Tom, thank you. It has been a topic that we have not touched on before. Talking about podcasts is definitely unique. So thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking with you and hearing your story. I loved it.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do.
You've been listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole Glitchio Els, COO. This podcast has been sponsored by Virtual Assist USA. If you'd like to know more about the hosts or exploring virtual assistant services, visit virtualassistusa.com for more information.